flow. Some of them are here tonight. Then. Yeah.
I love that. So you didn't go to film school. Tell me, what made you fall in love with film, and how did you figure out how to start doing it?
Well, I think the first time I had a real appreciation of the frame and the movement and the stopping of the movement was when I was like 13, and some of you are too young to remember this, but there was a president called JFK,
Yeah.
and he got assassinated, and there was a guy standing by with a Super 8 camera, or with actually a regular 8 camera, named Abraham Zapruder, and he managed to capture the fascination, sort of, and my parents bought like a Look magazine that had like every frame, and I realized, oh, these frames are what a film is comprised of. So like, you know, the moving image is actually a series of still images. And so initially I was a still photographer when I was a teenager, and eventually that became a little boring for me somehow. So I wanted to see them move, and that's how I traded in my Nikon and Pentax and came to New York, you know, to Olden Camera on 31st Street, and traded the cameras in for Super 8 and a couple of crates of Super 8 film and a little editor, and I got all these books on how to do it, and I started reading books about films, and you know, I'm a little bit obsessive compulsive, so once you go down that rabbit hole, you can just go forever.
What's your favorite film and why?
My favorite film? Well, the Zapruder film is probably my favorite film. Because it's both fiction and nonfiction. It's like the perfect you know, capturing of something that we don't actually know what happened. So we create fictions, you know, like Don DeLillo with Libra, or other, you know, people say, you know, the CIA did it, no, the Mafia did it. We still don't know, in a sense. So, to me, that's like the perfect movie that's real and not real.
I feel like that's a lot of what your films are kind of like. They're kind of set in a reality, but also like non-reality, and definitely with like the Blank Generation, you were just capturing stuff that was happening around you. So were you just, like, what drove you to make those?
Well, I came to New York, and I was kind of imbued with the whole experimental film thing, you know, like Jonas Mekas, who recently passed away, and Andy Warhol, and Stan Brakhage, and I would show my films at this place downtown, which no longer really exists, called Millennium, and Anthology, and places like that. But I had like a real affection for narrative, for story, that I was trying to bring into my more experimental thing, where I would kind of edit in the camera more and do stuff like that, playing with time, and then you know, and then I was introduced to, through Richard Hell and Ivan Krall, and other people, and Debbie was here, I think, to CBGBs, and then it was exactly at the time where I was really interested in the dynamic between sound and image. And, you know, so I went to CBs and filmed these bands, but I filmed them with a silent camera, which was kind of like, people would say, what the hell are you doing? You're filming bands silently? And my thing was, yeah, I add the sound later. And they said, you know, but it'll never be in sync. And I said, that's the whole point. Sync is for sissies, basically. And that became kind of my raison d'etre, you know, to have that, you know, that sound and image, if they're always married together, there's no tension. But if they're not, then something's happening, and to me that's more interesting than just a straight, sync.
With the Blank Generation, I mean, really, it's one of the most amazing music documentaries because you have everyone in that film. Patti Smith, you have Blondie, you have the Talking Heads, you have Richard Hell. So what was it like being in New York at that time and being around this like incredible music scene? Like, what was that like?
Well, it was, it's always kind of looking in the rearview mirror, It was, incredible, obviously. Everybody was making stuff. To me, the really good thing was, I think that, the American empire was falling apart. It was obviously something wrong with our culture, our country, the world, etc., that was inescapable to absorb. So really, the only thing you could do to sort of stay sane was make art. And I think everybody was doing that. So everybody, I think, from my point of view, was, getting off on everybody else's energy. And there would be these spots like, CB's or Max's or Mickey's, one university, where people would meet and exchange ideas. And, what are you doing? What's happening? Oh, all right. Hey, do you want to be in this? It was like, it was no like, now it's like, you go to casting agent and you get actors and you cast people and do this. It wasn't like that. It was like, oh, I need a guy in glasses with gray hair. Charlie, hey, would you be in my film? Here's what you do. You get tied up to a pole and Jane beats you up. Oh, okay, yeah. So that was how it worked. It was the ideas sometimes came actually from the people. Like, in The Foreigner, that was really Eric and I, like, meeting up and talking about a movie that was based on, a book by Colin Wilson called The Outsider, which was one of my favorite books at the time. And how do we do that here? And Eric said, well, what if he's a terrorist? He was like, okay, that sounds good. So he's a terrorist trying to hide out. Okay, does he make it? Obviously not, because it's the negative idea of the American dream. Like, he has to die. It has to be existential. So these were the pieces. And once you get those pieces in place, then you get the other pieces. Now, the thing with The Foreigner was that we had no money, so we only had one suit, and it was a white suit. So it started off with this really white suit that you could, but with each scene, the suit got worse and more ripped up and more ripped up. So you could never go back and shoot a scene that you had forgotten to shoot or didn't have time to shoot because you had to keep it moving. And it was the suit that actually, it was the clothing. And here we are in Gucci talking about clothing. So it's kind of apropos. But it was the suit that propelled the narrative because sometimes there are these jumps. And the jumps were because we couldn't do the scene I wanted to do in the middle there because the suit was too ripped up. And by the end, it's completely ripped up. So that's how it is.
And there's something so organic about the films that you're making and the cross-pollination of all the art scenes, right? Like you're using Duncan Hannah, who's an artist at the time, and then Debbie comes in and she's singing, and so like, were you just using your friends basically at the time? Did they inspire you to write?
Well,
or?
Duncan, I didn't even know. When I met Duncan, the first thing we talked about, we had gone to do an article. I was going to write an article about someone, and I can't remember who now. And Duncan was going to do a drawing of that person, or a collage, actually. So, and then when we started talking, we realized what we were talking about was Godard, not about music per se, or art. And we both were like these avid Francophiles. And I said to Duncan, I want to reinvent the Nouvelle Vague in New York, and I want to make a film about a guy who's like so crazy that he thinks he's living in Paris in 1959 instead of New York in 1976. And Duncan said, oh yeah, that sounds good. You know, and I said, well, and you're the guy. And he goes, what? Yeah, you're the guy. He goes, I'm not an actor. He goes, you are now. And he was perfect because he had the posters, he had the clothes, he had the whole attitude. And then, you know, I put an ad in the Village Voice because I didn't know how to find other people to be in it. And I spent like, I don't know, $20, this little ad that said, looking for an actors and a crew to make a Godard-like film, no pay but plenty of fun. And my phone number, and Eric Mitchell was the first guy to call me and came to my office. I was working in a film distribution company at the time, as well as I was a superintendent of the building on 15th Street, so I could save money to make this film, so I wouldn't have to pay rent. So